Jews to come to live in Poland to help to develop the country economically. He gives them very, very good conditions of life. He gives them tax breaks. He gives them all kinds of rights which perhaps normally the Catholic Church would not want them to have. And that attracts a lot of Jews eastward. What also attracts the Jews eastward is the fact that Jews are thrown out of England in 1290, they're thrown out of France in 1306 for the first time, and out of France for the last time in 1394. There are all kinds of anti-Jewish attacks and blood libels and all kinds of other libels and massacres throughout Germany in the 14th century, so that the survivors run eastward, where anti-Semitism perhaps is not as deeply embedded yet in the population.
For 3 centuries, Poland's Jews enjoyed a respite from the relentless persecution that racked neighboring lands. They referred optimistically to their host country by the Hebrew po-lin, meaning "we shall rest here," hoping that the tranquility would continue until the Messiah would arrive to lead them back to their homeland. Safety and financial stability translated into a spiritual blossoming. Poland became the epicenter of Ashkenazic Jewry, with an exceptional pious norm. In one of his works, 17th century mystic Rabbi Nosson Hanover describes the climax of their spiritual climb.
Every Jewish community maintained a yeshiva. Every community had young students whom they supported with a weekly stipend so they could study. There was scarcely a house in all of Poland where the Torah was not studied.
In the 16th century, the Szlachta, the Polish nobility, puts the Jews to work many Jews to work in a very special enterprise. They conquer the Ukraine and take over all kinds of very large estates, and Jews are appointed to run the estates for the Szlachta. Now, the Ukraine, as opposed to the rest of Poland, is not Catholic. The Ukraine is Greek Orthodox. The Ukrainians see the Poles as not only as overlords and as oppressors who squeeze them for money, they also see them as heretics.
In 1648, a savage man by the name of Bogdan Chmelnytsky led the Ukrainian Cossacks in an uprising against the ruling Polish nobility in a bid for independence. Chmelnytsky diverted much of his war effort to a genocidal purge of the region's Jews. As agents of the Polish nobility, the Jews collected the taxes that the non-Jewish residents owed to the Polish landlords. This had provided many Jews with financial security, but it now resulted in great suffering.
The Jewish community suffers tremendous damage. The leadership is wiped out, communities are laid low, Jews are murdered wholesale, and the Jewish community is dealt a blow from which it never will recover.
The survivors suffered exceptional trauma. Families struggled to earn a livelihood, and only a minority could afford their children a Torah education. Soon, a social rift emerged between the few scholars and the overwhelming majority of largely ignorant, impoverished Jews. This fissure only served to deepen the national trauma. Into this gloom, there stepped a man bearing tidings of salvation. It happened in 1660. Suffered exceptional trauma. Families struggled to earn a livelihood, and only a minority could afford their children a Torah education. Soon, a social rift emerged between the few scholars and the overwhelming majority of largely ignorant, impoverished Jews. This fissure only served to deepen the national trauma. Into this gloom, there stepped a man bearing tidings of salvation. It happened in 1665.
There appeared in the city of Smyrna in Turkey, in the Ottoman Empire at the time, a man named Shabtai Tzvi, a greatly charismatic, learned individual who declared himself to be the Messiah. He started a movement which spread like wildfire There's a famous Jewish woman whose name was Glickel of Hameln, which is in Germany. She describes how her father packed his bags, sold his business, sat there waiting with his packed bags, waiting.
It happened in 1665.
There appeared in the city of Smyrna in Turkey, in the Ottoman Empire at the time, a man named Shabtai Tzvi, a greatly charismatic, learned individual who declared himself to be the Messiah. He started a movement which spread like wildfire. There's a famous Jewish woman whose name was Glickel of Hameln, which is in Germany. She describes how her father packed his bags, sold his business, sat there waiting with his packed bags, waiting for the Messiah to reveal himself. The word came to Poland, and none other than Rabbi David Halevi, who was known in rabbinic circles as the author of one of the major commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, sent his son and someone else to go check out Shabtai Tzvi to see if it's possible that this is really the real thing. There were people who objected. There were people who warned, especially there was a rabbi in Amsterdam whose name was Rabbi Sasportas, who screamed and yelled that this guy's a fraud, but nobody wanted to listen to him.
Reasons for concern rapidly mounted as Shabtai grew increasingly erratic. His devotees attributed this to a superior state, but others recognized that he was mentally unstable. Modern scholars believe that he suffered from bipolar disorder. He introduced blatant violations of Torah law. Since the Messiah has arrived, he explained, matters previously forbidden are now permitted. One man who was particularly impressed with Shabtai was the Ottoman ruler Sultan Mehmed IV, who jailed the pseudo-Messiah as a revolutionary in February 1666. 7 months later, the Sultan gave him a choice of Islam or death. Shabtai chose Islam, and Jews worldwide reeled in disbelief.
The intensity of the anticipation that this was the Mashiach was so high that as high as the heights were of anticipation, so were the depths of disappointment among many, many Jews within the world. And the blow was just incalculable.
The Jews of Poland felt doubly abandoned. The new despair dashed their hopes for healing into the blood-soaked reality of post-massacre Poland, compounding hopelessness with suffering and social imbalance with spiritual crisis. A leadership vacuum ensued, and unworthy rabbis took advantage of the chaos and purchased or rented the title rabbi from the local nobles. These rabbis downplayed prayer and sincere spiritual growth. They focused on exhibiting their keen, analytic abilities, hoping to become widely known. Pay-to-play rabbis were not the role models and guides the struggling communities required at this fragile time. And by ripping the heart out of the daily prayers, these rabbis tore the soul out of a meaningful dialogue with God, just when the people needed it most. Despite a number of positive developments in Poland, even after 1648, Polish Jewry was in an overall material and spiritual decline. Many God-fearing Torah scholars struggled to survive. Unable and unwilling to bribe their way into rabbinical posts, they could also not rely on their impoverished brethren to hire them as teachers. Rather than fraternize with the unlearned masses, many such scholars embraced asceticism, studying, fasting, and praying in seclusion from their communities. Such individuals, who would normally have served as genuine role models, became unavailable to the community. Moreover, their overly ascetic lifestyles made them melancholic, deepening the national gloom. By the beginning of the 18th century, Jewry was spiritually lethargic, perhaps even comatose. This was the dismal scene into which Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov entered and began to spread his teachings.
that gives you a little bit of a background on who the Baal Shem Tov was. And with that in mind, let us now proceed and to understand how and what he introduced, what the movement was about, what his teachings were. But something's going a little mashiga there on the screen, which I can't figure out. Maybe it's the sound? That's fine, as long as it will behave now. Let's see what happens. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of a background of who the Baal Shem Tov was, a little bit of his history of when he came onto the fore as the great Hasidic master, introducing a whole new era of Judaism and an approach that was very much necessary. It paints the picture of the Khmelnytsky massacres. It showed you also about the rabbinic elite at the time, the scholars who were aloof and separate from everyone else. And it also talks about the asceticism that was prevalent at the time. Okay, now give me a second. I want to share with you that Wednesday at 11 o'clock, we're going to have a guest speaker. So Wednesday, I will try to give the share earlier than usual. I will try to start, since usually on a Wednesday, we have pearls. So this Wednesday, we'll probably start at 10, because at 11, we have a guest speaker, Simone Burke. And she invites you to join her as she shares her journey of insights and experiences on the ground during the Simchas Torah October 7th war in Israel, including a guided meditation and an activity to participate and contribute to the families of the South in Israel. So this will be Wednesday, the 29th of November, 11 a.m. She encourages you to bring colored cookies or pencils if you want to send any notes and letters. And I'll tell you something very interesting. I don't know if I've pointed it out yet to this group, but I certainly did to my shul. You know, a lot of people here right after October 7th wrote letters and sent notes, and many people contributed and sent all types of supplies that we shipped off to Israel, from tactical gloves to bulletproof vests to hiking socks to food to all types of things that you contributed and many others in this community. And Chabad House here sent truckloads of supplies to Israel with El Al. Well, I get a message about a week after October 7th from somebody who I know from Hatzalah, and he sends me a picture, and he asks me, is Menachem Mendel Kievman your son? I said, yes, I have a son, Menachem Mendel Kievman, but there's many others out there. He says, well, it was from my son, and I saw there the cards from so many others from my shul of the things that they sent. So not only did we see that they sent the stuff, but they sent, encouraging cards to tell the people in Israel, the soldiers, the grieving families, etc., that were with them, that were thinking of them, that would support them, and were in solidarity with them. So it's incredible to know that what we write and what we send actually reaches people. And in this case, randomly, it reached South Africans. So again, we're not going to talk random. We're going to talk how everything is divine providence. That's going to be today's shir. But with that in mind, we are going to have this talk on Wednesday at 11 o'clock. So that's going to be something additional. And also, we're going to have, besides for Wednesday's talk at 11 o'clock, we are going to have Dr. Stern here next week at 12:15 on Monday. And he is going to talk about, who knows what his topic is this time? What's that? Back pain. Back pain. It was requested. Back pain. So that's the topic on Monday, 12:15 with Dr. Stern. Okay, so 2 exciting things to look after. Don't forget, we have our Hanukkah party on Wednesday in 2 weeks. Yes. Okay. So don't forget, you can give an hour, you can give a few hours, whatever works for you. But over Hanukkah, we want to raise much needed funds to keep this program going. So if anyone wants to be part of it, whether by giving funds or helping with collecting funds, we would love to have your participation. Okay, with that in mind, let's give a quick recap of the video. This is what the video showed us. The Baal Shem Tov was born in the year 1698 to his parents, Eliezer and Sarah. In fact, the story goes that they were child, and and they were known to be very hospitable. And in their advanced age, they had a guest one Shabbos who was very interesting, and yet they remained hospitable and kind and caring. I don't know that I could be like that personally. We've had a lot of guests in our home, and we've seen people take advantage of us. So we've started to become a little bit more balanced with that. I mean, even yesterday, no names involved, but we hosted somebody over Shabbos. Thank God, it was very nice. And last night, the person came to collect something they left behind while I was out of the house with my wife. And the person came with a friend and told my kids they want to come for supper. And you tell me if that's acceptable, if that's appropriate. No, thank you. I'm a consensus. Okay, thank you. I thought I was a little crazy. And afterwards, I messaged the person. I said, I believe you invited a friend over for supper tonight. We don't mind sharing supper with you, but it would be nice and the right thing to ask the parents, especially if the parents aren't home. Oh, no, I'm so sorry. It was so-and-so. I'm sure you wouldn't have minded. I don't know who so-and-so is. But again, it's the right thing, especially if you have your own children. I'm sure you know that you would ask the parents and not impose your way into my house. And of course, I had to tell my kids never, ever to allow anyone in the house, no matter who they are, without checking with me first. So unfortunately, I've learned the hard way. But Eliezer and Sarah were known to be hospitable, and they perhaps didn't get turned off of people doing strange things. I'll never forget, there was a particular doctor in New York. He was a divorced fellow. He used to come to our house a lot on Shabbos. My father had a thing for many years. He would invite all the schleppers from shul. Not only schleppers, everyone, but schleppers was his thing. That, and it was an interesting Shabbos table for us. I got to say, as a kid, I was a little bit scared. There's this person that maybe they don't smell right. They didn't take a shower in a while. And the other person's got these dreadlocks and it felt a little funny. But we learned and we knew it's the mitzvah of achnasas orchim. And my father was very much like that. And my mother would say, we could always stretch the meal. We could always stretch the table. And I remember when that came to a screeching halt, even though it went on for many years that my parents were very... It wasn't a strange, it's just what he did was strange. He disappeared from the meal, but his kaput, his jacket and hat was still there. So we knew he was around. We couldn't find him. Went outside to look if he took a stroll, went downstairs, is he in the basement? Nobody's in the bathrooms. And at some point, my mother went to her room. Sometimes a woman goes into her room in the middle of the meal for something, and he's sleeping in one of my parents' beds. And after that, my parents were very circumspect on who's coming back into our house. So, it's commendable. It's unbelievable that you could be so hospitable and kind and generous. And but sometimes when you have children around, it's not so easy to do so. And I learned that as a young boy, letting any stranger into the house, and not, God forbid, that we're going to stop being hospitable, but I had to teach my children that no, just because we hosted this person for Shabbos and they came back to get something, which was with permission, but they can't just be inviting other people into the house. That's not the way it works. But Eliezer and Sarah, again, they were not like me. And they were kind of hospitable. And afterwards, this guest, turns out, wasn't just an ordinary guest. You know who he was? He said to them that he was Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet. And he said, because you had such patience and tolerance and care, I'm now going to bless you, and you will be blessed with a child. And this was the late Lamaki. This was Yisrael ben Eliezer, known as the Baal Shem Tov. He became an orphan at a young age, probably due to the fact that his parents were elderly when he was born. But he was, as the video described a little bit, he enjoyed spending time alone in the forest. And later on, as he grew older, he became a teacher's assistant, and then later became a balagala. And that's part of what he would do, taking the kids to and from the cheder. Balagala is the Uber driver or the bus driver. He became known as a miracle worker as people got to know him, and that's the name Baal Shem Tov, master of a good name. Yes, that's what Baal Shem Tov means, master of a good name. And it was only at the age of 36, in fact, on his 36th birthday in the year 1734, on the 18th of Elul, that he began to actually become the great master and teacher that he was renowned to be. But until then, he was more undercover, just doing interesting things that sparked the interest, the curiosity of people. Now, in order for us to understand the controversy, the debates amongst the Hasidim and Misnagdim, because he started the Hasidic movement, we got the backdrop of why he started it, when he started it. But let's understand the differences of what happened at the time and some of the ideas of his teachings that I'm going to put on the screen. I didn't manage to actually put texts on the screen, so I'll share the ideas with you, and then we'll discuss them on the screen, okay? So again, this was a very interesting time. Polish Jewry suffered terribly from a very low morale after the massacres and an overall sense of being distant and rejected by God after everything, the poverty that they were enduring and the hardships and everything else. And there was this widening wedge between scholars and non-scholars. And the economic conditions at that stage were quite dismal, to put it mildly. People were impoverished in Eastern Europe. What's interesting is the Gemara says somewhere, I don't remember where, but it says that God dispersed us. It was a favor. God dispersed the Jewish people around the world. When people were suffering in one place, there would be prosperity in another place, and they'd be able to help each other, and we would come to one another's assistance. But with a weakened spiritual life, and many felt that they lacked any meaningful relationship with God at the time, many people really were, either they went to an extreme, abandoning Judaism, or they went to the other extreme, becoming so fanatically religious that it didn't resemble what Jewish religion really should be. There were people that became hermits and adopted a life of asceticism, people who did things that separated them, like I said before, that religious or academic or scholarly elite. And that certainly created a schism, a divide between the people. So that's the backdrop. Let's examine a few of the Baal Shem Tov's very famous teachings and see how they were relevant to the challenges that the Jews at the time faced, and why he taught these concepts, these ideas, to try to remedy and to fix, to rectify the situation, the feeling, the condition of the Jews at the time. So here's one of them. And this comes from Likutei Yikarim, that cites a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. He says, when a person goes out, when you travel, you're going on a journey somewhere. What happens when you go on a journey? You know, a few weeks ago, we read the Torah portion where Abraham was traveling. This week. So Rashi there comments and he says that travel has an effect on 3 areas in a person's life. I don't know if that's still relevant today. You tell me. One, he says, kesef, financially. You're not at work. You're not at your desk. You're not getting things done, right? You're traveling. So it affects your bank account. What else does it affect? Intimacy. What's the third one? Is health? Is our health detrimental? I mean, look, I came back from a trip. I had a whirlwind trip, and I have to say I didn't sleep much on that trip, and no doubt it affected me. Like my head was always in a what do you call that? Like it was spinning. Thank God, when I came back here, I didn't feel jet lag. Got right back into it. So I don't know. Maybe it affects your health. Intimacy, I guess that's self-evident. And financially, yeah, if it's not paying the bills, what do you think? Okay. Immunity to it. Yeah, I don't doubt Rashi, and to tell you the truth, although I didn't get jet lag, thank God. I probably was jet lagged the whole trip, but coming back here, I got right back into my rhythm, So I definitely don't feel that haze any longer. But I don't know what it is. I certainly got like a stuffed nose since the plane. But the plane probably carries a lot of viruses, circulating. What was the thing you were going to add, Ramasha? It's beauty. No wonder why not looking so good since this trip. Sorry to disappoint you all. So why not? So the Baal Shem Tov says that when you travel, when you're on the road, you're out of your routine, right? And you're not able to pray as you usually do, right? There's no minyan in the airport necessarily. I remember when I flew in the year of mourning for my father. So when I left New York, coming back here, I was able to catch an early minyan. I flew South African Airways, Alav Shalom. It was still around back then. And I was able to catch a minyan in the morning. What did I miss? I did miss Mincha Ma'ariv. There wasn't a minyan on the plane. But interestingly, when I was flying to Kazakhstan, listen to this. The irony that when I left Johannesburg, I booked a ticket that was cheaper. Somebody says here, Rolling Stones gather no mush. So we come. What's that? Moss. Okay. Maybe you got to explain it to me. I'm not. Oh, Rolling Stone. Got it. I hear you. Yeah. Yes, I hear you. Okay, good. Cute. Thank you for sharing that, Matt, one of our virtual participants. So I'm sharing with you a story. It happened 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago. It's an older story. I don't want to go through all the details unless some of you, because I think some of you heard it. But the story goes back to 2018. We had a visitor call us up. Don't forget, we opened our shul for visitors. And we got a visitor calling me from America, from Miami Beach, a well-to-do person. He says, I'm coming with my family. I don't remember if he had 9 kids or 11 kids, if they're a group of 9 or whatever it was. They were a big group, a family. And they're staying at a hotel, the Michelangelo, which was right down the block from us, around the corner from the shul. And they said, well, we could afford, we're not, impoverished, we're well-to-do. We'll give you $500. Will that pay for the Shabbos meals that we want to have with you? I said, $500 pay for the Shabbos meals. You want to do the math. At that stage, it was probably 15 rand to $1. Today would be worth it a lot more. But do the math. There's plenty you can do with $500. I said, thank you. I'm inviting, the whole community for the Shabbos meal, and you're sponsoring the bracha. Everybody will be at the Kiddush on Shabbos. I was very grateful to them. And indeed, I told my wife, you have the weekend off, no cooking. You're going to order from RTG. We're going to have a very nice Shabbos, and we ordered a lot of nice food, and we had a lot of guests, and we ordered nice drinks, and it was beautiful decor and flowers. We made a beautiful Shabbos table. Yeah, fantastic. The guy calls me up minutes before Shabbos. He says, Rabbi Ari, we just arrived. He says that their luggage is lost, and they just got to the hotel, and they're exhausted, and they're tired, and they don't have Shabbos clothes. They're not going to come. Can I please bring the food over to the hotel? They will give me another $500. This is pretty generous. I don't get such donations all the time. But I said to them, guys, it's very nice of you to offer that. But what's that? The 500 he gave me in advance, yeah? Paid already. And now he's offering another 500. I said, you know something? I can't, another 500 would be very nice and generous, but it's already almost Shabbos. I said, don't worry about your Shabbos clothes. You could come to our house without Shabbos clothes. We won't judge you. We understand that your luggage is lost. If you're too tired, you can miss shul. Just come join us. He says, no, please. I said, I'm so sorry, but we're already going to shul. It's going to be impossible to take the food over to your hotel. But he said, no, I'll Uber it. I said, don't worry about it. Just come. You'll have a good time, I promise. And I didn't see them at shul. After shul, I waited 15, 20 minutes, half an hour. We have a bracha, always. And we had a nicer bracha that week, thanks to them. We had sushi and goodies. And eventually they showed up in their non-Shabbos clothes. I said, it's so good to see you all. Let's go. We walked to our house. Our house was very close to the shul back then. And we walked. We had an unbelievable Shabbos dinner. They had kids, my kids' ages. They got friendly with each other. I think his wife was younger than my wife. It was incredible. We had a very beautiful Shabbos together with this couple from Miami. And the next day he came, he liked to lane, he laned, thank God he laned, because my laning would be shocking. And we had a wonderful Shabbos. When he got an Aliyah at the Torah, he said to me, yesterday, you rejected my $500 additional donation. Today, I'm giving you $1,000. Sometimes it's worthwhile, eh? Now, just it wasn't practically possible. What am I going to do? Take the food and run to the hotel? I said, don't worry about it. You'll enjoy. And they had a great time. So he also said to me, I forgot to tell you, at the Shabbos meal, he said to me that he goes every year to Kazakhstan. Why does he go to Kazakhstan? Because on the 20th of Av is the yard side of the Rebbe's father. And he was invited one year as a philanthropist to come for the Rebbe's father's yard site. And he was shocked. What was he shocked about? He says, if you go to the Rebbe's yard, kaver, the ohel of the Rebbe, any time of the year, you'll always find it's busy, lots of people there. Okay, granted, the Rebbe's buried in New York, and there'll always be people present. Especially if you come to an auspicious day like the Rebbe's yard site, thousands of people will be there. Maybe even 100,000 people will be there. I've been there. The lines are long, and you get a few seconds to be in the holy place. He says he came to the Rebbe's father's grave in his yard site, and there was a handful of people. That's it. And this handful of people flew in from overseas to be there. There's not much of a big Jewish community in Kazakhstan. Granted, there are quite a few Chabad houses. In fact, there's a Chabad house a block away from the Rebbe's father's burial. So he said, I made a pact. I said, if finances will permit me, I'll make sure that next year there will be a minyan of people always present, 24 hours. The Rebbe's father, who gave us the Rebbe, his wife is buried in New York. So she's also, her burial place also gets visitors. But in fact, he was buried in exile. It's an interesting story that I've told at that time of the year in August, but it was very sad. He said that nobody was there. So he said to me, he hired people to go, and he built it up, and he built it up. And as his business grows, and as he's prosperous and successful, he invites more people. So he's inviting me. So besides for the $1,000, he said he's giving me a ticket to Kazakhstan to go visit this special place. So now it was a year later, and he gave me the ticket. Besides for the $1,000 that he donated to our shul, personally, he gave me a ticket. So I had a ticket, but I didn't want to take advantage. Also, unlike the $1,000 that he gave me right then and there the next day, the ticket, he said to me, you buy the ticket on your own credit card and send me the receipt and I'll pay you back. So I didn't know, not that I questioned him, but first of all, financially, it was half the price to fly from Cape Town back to Johannesburg than to go directly from Joburg. I don't know why. It's weird. There's a website, in fact, that finds these kinds of tickets. It's called Skiplag. Anyone of you ever heard of it? Skiplag, there's a website that gives you tickets that are funny kinds of routes. I found this myself. When I was looking to go to Australia the other week, I found these types of tickets as well. They don't recommend you take luggage, but I did. But basically, Turkish Air from Joburg to Kazakhstan was about 20,000 rand. But from Cape Town with a stopover in Joburg to Kazakhstan was like 9,000 rand. So on his cheshbon, I wasn't going to be extra generous. I booked that one. I davened at my shul in the morning, took the Chau train to the airport, took a flight to Cape Town on Kalula that I bought for a few hundred rand. Then I got on this Turkish Air flight that stopped in Joburg, jumped out, went to shul. It stopped for about 3 hours, which, trust me, was cutting it tight. It was very risky what I did. I jumped on the Chau train, which is a 12-minute ride to my shul, but it's about a half hour if you consider it. Then I ran into my shul. We did Mincha Ma'ariv, took another half hour. And then getting back to the airport, again, it's a 12 minutes, but it was also half an hour. And I got back just in time. I had to go through security again, and it was fine. But it was risky. It was cutting it very fine. I didn't go home, even though my house was right down the block. There was no time to go home. So I did that at least. And then I want to share with you. So I didn't miss the minyan. Twice that day, I had Shachris in the morning, I had Mincha Ma'ariv in the evening. When I arrived in Istanbul in the morning, I had a full day layover, about 18 hours. So what did I do? Somebody told me there's a shul in the Istanbul airport, which I couldn't find. So what do you do next if there's no shul? I'll tell you what I did. I went to the El Al check-in. I needed to daven. Not that I'm always so holy, but it was a year of mourning for my father. I wanted to say Kaddish. I went to the El Al check-in, and I gathered like 6 religious guys, and there were other people around. I said, will you guys answer? And we did a quick minyan in the El Al check-in. And I did the same thing in the evening from Khamar because there's quite a few flights. I don't know if it was all El Al. Maybe it was just Turkish going to Israel. Maybe it wasn't El Al. But the point was, I found the flights that were going to Israel, and I managed to get a minyan there. And by the time I got to Kazakhstan the next morning, I got a minyan there too. So I didn't miss a minyan on that journey because of that. But the Baal Shem Tov says that when you travel and you're not able to pray properly, you're not able to study properly as you normally would, right? So how do you serve God then? He said, don't be pained by this, that you're not able to do it in the right way. Again, I traveled. I went to the Kinos last week. I was in Australia the week before. And when you go on a trip, you're out of your norm. But you guys know stories of mine that I told you over the years, like the story of my Torah scroll and other stories. You'll find a way. You talk to somebody, you connect with somebody. There's always something. You never know why you're there. God perhaps wants us to serve him in a different way that day. And sometimes it's in one way, in the usual way. And sometimes it's in a different and lesser usual way. And that's the reason why we have an opportunity. When you're sitting on the plane, you have an option to sit there and mind your own business. Nothing wrong with that. Personally, I usually don't mind my own business. I usually wind up conversing with the person sitting next to me on the plane. And whether they're fellow Jews or not, it's always an interesting conversation. On my last flight last year, I remember sitting next to a guy, an Afrikaans fellow, who was coming back from America where he got hurt on a farm and his leg was severed. And he told me he got workers' comp in America. They gave him $5 million workers' comp. Now he's coming back to South Africa. You know what $5 million will do for him here? That's like, he would rather have his leg than 100 million rand. Just by the way. Okay, I want to remind you that the Hebrew word for wealth is ashir. And ashir is an acronym for einayim, your eyes, shinayim, your teeth, yadayim, your hands, and rosh and raglayim, your feet. Your true wealth is your health. So it goes back to what we said before. But that wasn't the point of the Baal Shem Tov to discuss this idea of our depreciating health when diminishing health when you travel. He's saying when you're not in a normal situation, then see the opportunity within that. Don't see it as a stumbling block. Don't see the challenge as an impossibility, but see it as an opportunity to make a difference. I remember once doing a Pesach with back when we used to try to have partners doing it with another group. So one year we had an Israeli guy, and any suggestion I had, he would say, EF-shar, EF-shar. EF-shar means it's impossible. He forgot that the word impossible also spells I'm possible. Okay, and I think we learned that in so many ways over the last couple of weeks. One of the stories I saw was a rabbi in Jerusalem. Another family. A rabbi, what's the family name? Kalmanson. Rabbi is a Rosh Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. And our children said we want to help out. And he's got a son, Al-Hanan, and he spearheaded this group. They were like a Maccabi family. And they went to the kibbutz Be'eri and the kibbutzim and Sderot on the day of Shmini Atzeret, on that Shabbos, that terrible day when the massacre, when the attack happened. And they said, nothing's impossible, we're going to help. And they did a few loads of people that they kept taking and rescuing in a van, in a tender, taking people to safety. And unfortunately, in his 3rd or 4th round, he was shot and killed by the terrorists. So, but his motto was, don't say EF-shar, don't say it's impossible. So that's a young man by the name of Elchanan Kalmanson, who was murdered on that day while trying to help save lives. So that's one teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. Let's look at another teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov taught that crying is detrimental. He says, Habechia hu ra ma'od, is extremely detrimental. While at that stage, you can understand that people were downtrodden. People were hurt. People were broken because of the situation that they were facing. But the Baal Shem Tov said, It's a great mitzvah, the Torah says, to serve Hashem with joy. Certainly, so that's an expression, we say it before benching. Azorim bedima berina. So those who sow with tears will reap with joy. But the Baal Shem Tov said there were enough tears already at that stage. He wanted to emphasize and highlight and encourage people to be joyous, to be happy. And that was why the Hasidim became to be known as the Freiliche, the happy ones, the happy klappies, happy chappies. Yesterday, I heard an expression. We had 2 chuppahs yesterday. One in the morning in Pretoria, a young at heart couple. And in the afternoon at Sandringham Gardens, another young at heart couple. You know what happened? Another couple at Sandringham Gardens comes to me afterwards and says, Rabbi, will you marry us too? I said, sure. Go to the Beis Din, follow the procedures of how to apply for a marriage, and I'll be glad to do your marriage as well. So it's becoming fashionable now for elderly people, elderly couples to wed. It was very nice to be at 2 weddings yesterday of elderly couples. So why did I mention it? Oh, Rabbi Fox says under the chuppah yesterday that when you ask the chassan about the ring, you ask him, is it worth the expression the Talmud asks is it a shaveh pruta? Pruta, that's an ancient denomination of money. The ring has to be worth something, because the 3 ways of consummating a Jewish marriage is kesef, shtar, and bia. Kesef means something of silver, of value. Interestingly, usually it's preferable for the ring to be gold. Silver is also okay. So he asked, is kesef. That has to be a value, and it has to be his own. That he is giving it to his wife, a declaration symbolically that he's going to financially take care of her. So Rabbi Fox asked, is it worth a chappie? Now you guys have to help me out here, because I don't know what a chappie is. A what? Oh, is it worth a chewing? I said it's worth a happy chappie. But I don't know. Anyways, the Baal Shem Tov taught you have to serve Hashem with joy. Now this is something that we're told in the Torah. Serve God with joy. But that was an emphasis the Baal Shem Tov put on life, that we should serve Almighty God with joy. Celebrate life. Find every opportunity to celebrate a mitzvah. Okay? So the first thing, again, is see the challenge as a window of opportunity. The second thing is serving God with joy. Another teaching from the Baal Shem Tov. And remember, in those days, a lot of people were ascetics and were hermits, and they ignored their bodies. And the Baal Shem Tov, in fact, quoted a verse that says, when you see the donkey of your enemy, and you will be hesitant, you'll be tempted to refrain from helping it. Why? Simply, you see your enemy, your annoying neighbor's got a flat tire, a puncture on the highway. You're going to help them out? That annoying neighbor who gives you all that trouble? Forget about it. Huh? You'll do the other tire, exactly. Keep them away longer. So the Torah says, don't behave that way. You have a responsibility, you have a mitzvah to go help them. That's the literal understanding of the verse. If you want a deeper understanding of the verse, says the Baal Shem Tov, kitira chamor, when you see chumriyut. Chamor doesn't just mean a donkey, but chamor can mean corporeality, physicality. Chomer, physical, material things. As sanacha. Many people in those days saw a life of physical well-being as an enemy, a distraction from a spiritual lifestyle. You'll be tempted to refrain from helping it. Why should I help it out? Why should I enjoy good food? Good food is a distraction. Why should I go enjoy some music? It's a distraction. And all of a sudden, everything physical becomes the antithesis, the enemy of the body, of the spiritual well-being. Said the Baal Shem Tov, Azayv Tazayv Imoy. Together, body and soul have to work together. It's spirituality and physicality. Bring your heaven down to earth. It has to be a joint effort. It has to be together. That's what you have to do. And therefore, the Baal Shem Tov was, so to say, admonishing in a constructive way the people who lived that life of asceticism, that was common then. It's common still today. If you go to the Far East, you know what goes on? I spent a month in India, in Pune. In Pune, there's a world famous ashram. This ashram is called Osho. Let me tell you, the people that run these ashrams are multimillionaires. The people who come there give away everything they have to them, and they become, it's literally a cult. And it's avodah zarah. There's idolatry that goes on there. Anyways, I watched what happened. The people get into this, they get into these, I don't know what you call the, I don't want to compare, because in Judaism we have Hasidim and people who become committed to their Rebbe, but it's a completely different phenomenon. And I could see it as one who grew up in a Hasidic lifestyle and still maintain it, and seeing what the people were like there. It's a completely different world. Not there's obviously some comparisons, but the common denominators are very different from one another. Anyways, why do I say that? Something I noticed there, it's very quiet in the ashram. I mean, ideally in shul, it should also be quiet. I gotta shush people all the time. But you know the story about this guy who goes to the ashram, and they tell, I don't know, religion. It's one of those religions, I'm not making fun of any other religions. God forbid, it's not a good thing to do. The story goes, the fellow subscribes to this religion, and you have to be quiet, because it's all about refinement of the body and the soul and bringing it together in alignment with each other. And it's meditating and contemplating and focusing, and he's... And he can't speak after 2 years, or maybe after a year, I don't know, after 12 months, to say, okay, you could say 2 words. He says, food bad. Okay, no more words for another 2. It's a yid. The yid is halter, and he can't speak. Another 12 months go by, they let him say another 2 words. He says, another 12 months, it's the longest time period ever, and they let him say 2 more words. He says, I quit. And they look at him, they said, good riddance. All you've been doing here since you came is complain. Okay, jokes aside, the Baal Shem Tov was saying that the body and soul have to work with each other, and we cannot break the body through affliction. He said, even though there was a time, and there are certain periods in our calendar when we do fast, when affliction is appropriate and necessary. But nevertheless, he said that's not the norm. That's not the way it should be. Okay, let's look at 1 or 2 more ideas from the Baal Shem Tov. Another one was a parable. I forgot to put the slide in there. I'm sorry. But I made that slide already for a previous shiur where we talked about prayer. And I'm just going to remind you that idea. Baal Shem Tov gave the metaphor about prayer where he says a prayer from a poor person who's pained. He says he pours out his speech before God. And the plain meaning of this, it's a verse of Tehillim, I think it's in Kuf Beis, that a person pours out his heart to Hashem. So they said the simple understanding of that verse is that the poor person beseeches God that God should relieve him of his poverty. I was once in this shul here, and there was some big machers in trouble. And they said, oh, God Almighty, I'm nothing. And the other one says, I'm a nothing. And then this schlepper comes into the shul. He says, I'm also nothing. And they look and go, look who thinks he's a nothing. Anyways, one of them that just took out 100 rand said, here, you take the 100 rand. Now, God, could we get your undivided attention? All right. Sorry. Those jokes didn't go so well. Got to tell them better. Said the Baal Shem Tov, there's a story about a king, and this king announced one day that anyone who has any special requests, he will grant them their requests. So one person comes and one person asks for honor, another person asks for money, another person asks for healing, and everyone, whatever they asked the king for, the king granted their wishes. But there was one wise person. What did he ask of the king? No. He said, I want to spend time with you, to speak with you. I want to be able to meet with you. Yes, Sapari, you remember it. And the king liked that. He said, this person doesn't just want things from me. He just appreciates me, just wants to spend time with me. And the king appreciated that. Yeah. The Pope, he wanted a new bag to collect. Look, there's a lot of versions of the story of the different people. There's one guy who went around collecting. He says, when I become rich, I'm going to make sure that all the apartment buildings have lifts, so he doesn't have to actually schlep. Yeah. But the problem is, in all these instances, all they see is the person's short-sighted. All they're seeing is that little bit, what could I get? What the Baal Shem Tov was emphasizing here was that the individual who asked for appointment to see the king in the parable, and of course the allegory of this metaphor is talking about Hashem. Do you just want stuff from Hashem? Is God your ATM machine? That whenever you need money, you turn to God. Whenever you need healing, you turn to God. Whenever you need things, you turn to God. Or is God Almighty one you want to have a personal relationship, a connection with? In fact, what's the meaning of the word prayer? What does prayer mean? Now that's tefillah. Now you jump in the gun. Prayer comes from the etymology in Latin of precarious. A person's in a precarious position. So they pray, they beseech, they ask God to help them to resolve their situation. The Hebrew word for prayer is tefillah. And that, as you just correctly said, is what? Connection. Litapel means to connect. So that's the idea of what a prayer isn't just, yes, there's bakasha. Bakasha means to request. That's more accurately prayer. The Hebrew word prayer, tefillah, is more accurately translated as to connect. You go out for coffee with somebody you want to connect with, you want to just connect with them, you want to connect with Hashem as well, Almighty God. And that's an important message, and that's what the Baal Shem Tov was teaching, that prayer is about connection. We need to connect with Hashem. Let's just get one or two more insights in before we conclude today. And another point the Baal Shem Tov says, that you should always have in mind, Yachshav, a person should think, should consider, I want you to hear this because tomorrow we're going to discuss this further. That Hashem encompasses the entire world. Now this was again a matter of controversy. Why? Because there was a difference of opinion of what that means, that God encompasses the whole world. And that's something we need to talk about tomorrow, please God. Because the Baal Shem Tov was saying you have to always be happy and think and believe that God is always with you. God is always watching over you, right? And the thing was that idea was not something that everybody appreciated, because some people felt this is a concept of called, whether it's symptom, the pshittus, whether this concept of God is literally with us where we are or figuratively with us. And that's something we're going to talk about tomorrow, please God. What does it mean that God's always with us? You know that song? Don't you know you're never alone, never alone. It doesn't matter where you are. There's nothing in his eyes more special than you. Wherever you go, Hashem is with you. That's a very important message Baal Shem Tov taught. And some of the other great sages, including the Vilna Gaon, had a difference of opinion on how to understand that. So we're going to, please God, tomorrow recap what we just discussed today. Let's, in fact, we can put it, we'll do this tomorrow, okay? We'll recap these ideas in short, and we'll see how it was relevant to that era, to that time. And then we're going to go into this concept of what does it mean God is always with you? How do you understand it literally, which the Baal Shem Tov taught? And the Vilna Gaon understood it a little bit more figuratively. So what do you mean? You go in the bathroom, God, you're taking God in the toilet with you? Yeah? So let's talk about this tomorrow. Let's understand this concept, and that will be tomorrow's shiur. Again, tomorrow morning, we will still have Dr. Kennedy, Helen Manucha will do yoga with you, breathing, stretching exercise, 9:30, followed by the shiur, please God. Excuse me, 10:30. Today, don't miss art therapy at 1 o'clock after lunch. And Wednesday, don't forget, we have a special guest, Simone Burke, who's going to come to talk about her experience in Israel on October 7th, which will be preceded by a shiur. I might change up that Wednesday shiur. We'll talk a little bit. This is only time permitting if I can prepare it, because people did ask me to discuss this about the hostage release, the hostage deals, and what does halacha say about it? What does Judaism say? It's very complicated. What Judaism says about the release of Pidyon Shvuyim. Pidyon Shvuyim is a very important mitzvah. The question is at what expense, to what degree. So maybe we'll do that Wednesday. I'm not promising, but we'll see. Try. All right, but I want to finish this idea first to understand the conflict, the controversy. So we'll see what happens with that. Maybe we'll do that. You know what? Let's rather continue this theme for the rest of this week. And next week, before we jump into Hanukkah, which we'll do, I guess, Tuesday, Monday, we could talk about the hostage release deal, and we'll discuss that from a halachic perspective. All right. Give me a little bit more time to prepare an interesting collection of insights. Thank you all. Enjoy. See you later. Enjoy lunch. Enjoy art. And see you tomorrow morning.